who's clearly been there, who's experienced gender-based violence, and that's why she's writing this book. Then it really focuses on the way we genderize everything, and that's what creates, and, this whole conversation of race and gender, race was never a concept, I don't think, prior to the 1600s, prior slavery. These are human constructs that have been created so that people can retain power, right, on the planet or in the country. These are new concepts. And why do we have such a strong, it's a girl, it's a boy, so they're going to go on really very different trajectories. I'd like to see that change and really have everything be based on the content of one's character. Hey, wouldn't that be great? Like prior authors have written about so beautifully. Some of our greatest, thinkers have talked about, hey, wouldn't that be a nice world when we can really assess somebody more so on the content of their character versus anything else, and the difference that they make, in their own family, perhaps, or community. So, yeah. So it includes stories. It's 5 interviews of well-known people. Lynn Povich, who I don't know if you know Lynn Povich, possibly. She is was the first woman editor of Newsweek magazine. I interviewed Gloria Felt, who is a New York Times bestselling author. Gloria was the past president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Maxine Clark, who is the founder of Build-A-Bear, the bear company where you build your own bear, right? Maxine, I was fortunate to work with her for many years in my corporate life. I interviewed Zarin Burnett III, who's a LA investigative journalist out of LA. He's awesome. He writes about rape culture, younger guy. And then he's got a really great perspective and understanding for men and how they need to shift that culture, right? And that identity to create a safe place for us all. And then Mark Levin, who happens to be my brother. He's a leader in the biotech world today. And he's always brought this sense of equality into the companies. And he's just a leader, still today after decades in the biotech industry. So it's fascinating to look at the sciences and see how women, through his eyes, women are moving through the industry, and the difference he made. When he left one of the big companies he started many, he actually put a female, one of the first women CEOs of a biotech company in place. So that was a pretty big day. CNN was all over the place and whatever. And he called me that day, said, hey, Lauri, we did it. We got a woman CEO. So, big deal. We can all make a really extraordinary difference. And then at the end, I interviewed a bunch of kids, 18, 19, 20, 25-year-olds, to look at what the future voices look like. And in between that, I provide the habits of inequality that we're plugging into, all of us, that keep equality way out there. Keep it, at arm's length. We're not closing the gap fast enough. Experts say it's another 100 years to close the gender gap. That keeps us all in a state of confusion, chaos, lack of abundance, poverty, wars. And so the habits of inequality. And then chapter 8, there's this wonderful analysis that I got a little help from an old research friend to do, where I looked at those global reports that show this is what we can do when we plug into those habits of equality. And then I include those 7 habits of equality that everybody can plug into on a day-to-day basis to close that gap at a much faster rate. So that's the book kind of in a nutshell. Lots of stuff in there, stories, personal stories, interviews, studies, research. Thanks for asking that question. I appreciate it.
Yes, because I can see, have you had anyone give any negative opinions towards the book's topic or even the research that it's in it?
I haven't as of yet. It was released in April. It's coming, I'm sure. In this country, it's coming, right? Uh-huh. And that's why I love these conversations. I did a podcast not long ago with this guy in New York, tough guy, white, tough guy, all the privilege, right? All that stuff that we know about. And he said to me, my friends made this statement about women, and he repeated the statement. And he said he came back at them with another statement. Anyway, it was about being a piece of, can I say this? Pete, you don't care what I say, do you?
Nope.
Do you care?
Nope, not at all. Okay.
Yeah, he said, hey, the guy said, hey, oh, wow, she's a great piece of ass or something like that about this woman. And the guy that was interviewing me said, hey, what if I said that about your daughter? And I was thrilled that he said that. And the guys said in return, yeah, you could say that about my daughter. So it kind of had him thinking. And he thought, Lauri, not that long ago, I was one of those guys. And he says, I just don't think you can change these guys. And I said, well, that's interesting because in this conversation alone, you stopped calling all the women you were initially saying girls, calling them girls. You corrected yourself and said women. I said, that's what the book is about. The day we respect and call women women like we call men men, that's the day equality is in motion, Yeah. So anyway, he goes, I get it. We can all change. So, he was like this kind of naysayer in the beginning of the interview, like, another conversation about, social injustice, left-wing liberal, whatever she is, right? But anyway, it evolved into this beautiful, I think, conversation amongst two people. And that's what I want the book to do, really, is foster conversations, get in the hands of more students and colleges. Been reaching out to women in gender studies programs. Got some interest here where I am now. I moved from St. Louis a few years ago to little island off the coast of Charleston. So anyway, hoping to make a difference in South Carolina. This is a tough state for women. Domestic violence rates are some of the highest in the nation, and there's some of the lowest paid people in the country live right here in South Carolina. So got some work to do.
Yep, all over. Now I'm going to be a devil's advocate. And
okay. Here we go. Right. I've been waiting.
All right. So now, what about the nice guys? The ones that were taught to court a woman, call her by a rightful name and not call her a piece of ass or anything like that. Open the door, be a gentleman. The typical, what every girl figures is the Prince Charming gentleman. Now, what were you to say to those guys that are like, we're not all bad guys. That men are strong and men do this, and not all men are going in that direction to be nasty and negative to women. What's your key for those guys?
Question for you too, for me, before I answer that, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. It's a very great question. Is why do we leap from men, there's men doing things like this to all men? It's an interesting thing how people say that, well, not all men. Men say that a lot. Well, I'm not like that. We get that. No, I wouldn't be the person I am if I didn't have the father I had, and I didn't have the wonderful brother and father that I have. Those two men inspired me to let me know, wow, this is not everybody, clearly. So as I stated in the introduction, which talks about, I grew up not far from where Michael Brown was shot and killed in St. Louis. So I start off talking about that shooting and many other police shootings. That's where the book starts. I would not be hopeful, but given all the violence that we see in the world and country and the violence against women, if it weren't for, I make the statement, this is not about all men, but when you're the 10th most dangerous country in the world to be female, the United States, don't you think it's too many men are doing this? Oh, it's not all men. The majority of men are not violent, but too many men are.
Okay.
And I want to help those men as much as I want to help the women who've been hurt by them. I forgive everybody that's laid their hands on me, that, assaulted me. I have gone through that work to forgive them because they too are victims of a society, of a culture, of a world, a patriarchal world we live in that expects men, demands of men that they really become inhuman. So, fourth habit of equality. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Rockshana?
I'm ready.
Are you ready? You sure? You're ready for this? This is devil's advocate. Respect and appreciate kind and caring men. Who doesn't want a kind, caring, passionate friend, father, brother, uncle, neighbor? That's kind of the next sentence. But respect and appreciate. We don't do that. We put down the guys oftentimes, right? That are the great guys, or the nice guys, or the stay-at-home dads. Stop doing that. We love those men, right? We love those men. We want more of those men. Those are the strong men. You know,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's what it takes to be a strong man. We talk a lot about strong women because we're kind of turning the corner on our identity. The strong man is the one that's comfortable with his emotions, that expresses, that cries, that connects with his children and cares and supports them and is kind and caring to everybody and doesn't measure his worth by, how many sexual conquests and what's the money in his bank account and how many people he's beat up that day or whatever that stuff is
Right.
that he's taught. So that's a very important habit of quality, that we respect and honor those men.
Oh, all right. I like that answer. Cause they're out there. They're like, oh, we're not all like this. But I respect you for not being like that. I appreciate you for not being like that. But hey, the guy next to you is.
Yeah, and they're listening to it. I went to a Black Lives Matter event in St. Louis after Michael Brown. This was years ago, 2015.
Mhm.
I think 6 years ago, Michael Brown was killed, murdered, and I talked to a couple of the Black Lives Matters activists, men. They happened to be men standing there, and I approached them. It was really cool. They were like 20, 22, 20, pretty much leaders in their area, and I was really fortunate to be able to talk to them. And I said, hey, I got a question for you. How are the guys, when you hang out with the guys, how are they treating the women? And he just kind of stopped. He didn't think I was going to ask him that kind of a question or whatever, but he really wanted to engage in the conversation. He said, not good. They're beating, they're pushing them, they're shoving them, they put them down. And I said, so I just want you to understand, I just want, no, then I asked a question. Well, how is that different from the police officers? Because we're being killed at a much higher rate by men. As a matter of fact, Black women are killed at the rate 3 times higher than white women are by men, right? And that's mostly Black men. The leading incidence of death amongst pregnant people is men. I mean, these are scary statistics, right?
Oh, wow.
It's really scary. And 60% of the murders of women, I think intentional murders, if I'm saying this correctly, somebody can correct me, that's fine. I see a lot of statistics, are intimate partners or former intimate partners. So he just kind of sat there and I said, can I count on you the next time you hear that to say something, to speak up? Because we matter too. The women of the world matter too. And he goes, I completely get that. And I invited him to an event that was about that. And I don't know that happened all those years ago, but he certainly was really great to talk with that day. And he really got what I was saying. So yeah, anyway, it's great conversation. I hope we can start talking about this topic more and more. That's really the purpose of the book, to elevate the level of conversation, because people don't take what's happening to women nearly as seriously as we do other very important topics, issues that we have.
Do you think women don't, not more, of course, there's women all around that are trying to make a difference and trying to, do somewhat of what you're doing, but do you think women don't do it or hesitate to do it out of some type of fear or backlash for what they have to say or what they want?
I interviewed Jamie Cobb, and Jamie, won't mind me saying this. Jamie is very big advocate in the country. She was here in South Carolina. She worked on Cory Booker's campaign. I met her here when I went to that event. And I continue to stay in touch with her. And now she's doing great work in Boston. Hopes to come back to South Carolina and run for office. So I will work on that campaign. Woman of color. She actually came to my launch party too. She was one of my speakers, one of the speakers at the launch party for the book. So I love her. And she said, Lauri, when a Black woman is abused in her home, she's hesitant to call the police. And I said, tell me more about that. And she said, well, we're afraid he's going to get shot. And so I just had this kind of like, this dissolving feeling of some angst that I'd been carrying. Why are not more women of color actually speaking out about the violence? Because the rate of violence in Black community is much higher in terms of domestic violence. And I thought, I've been beat up enough and hurt enough. And I'm like, we got to have all hands on deck right now. We got to be. And I just kind of shrank. I felt so small. I felt so unaware. I felt so sad for the lack of awareness and sensitivity I had. I thought I never had to worry about that. I never had to worry about that. That's a big deal. When you love or you marry somebody, you don't want them shot and killed.